One of the great ironies of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca is that the narrator, just when her adversary, Miss Danvers, is on the verge of convincing her to commit suicide by jumping out of the window of the West Wing of Manderley, just as that moment when the narrator seems to be at her weakest, primarily because of the trick of Miss Danvers, wore a costume to the ball that was exactly the same costume that Rebecca had worn the year before. Just when it seems that our narrator is at her lowest point, seemingly rejected by Maxim, uh, seemingly feeling no self worth at all, seemingly suddenly hoping that she will not have to struggle anymore to overcome the psychological ghost of Rebecca. Just at that moment, when she's getting ready to jump, there was an explosion. And Miss Danvers says, "Oh, it's a rocket exploding." We can probably think of a flare uh, because there's a ship that's run aground in the bay. And suddenly, at that moment, Miss Danvers stops trying to seduce the narrator into death. And suddenly, at that moment, it's almost as if the narrator snaps into a new sense of reality. The irony is that from this moment on, the narrator is not really troubled by Rebecca at all. So Miss Danvers wanted the narrator to destroy herself so that she, Miss Danvers, could enjoy the presence of Rebecca, the memory of Rebecca, figuratively speaking, the ghosts of Rebecca, so she could enjoy Rebecca without having to worry about the new Miss De Winter. Well, this backfired because now the narrator had become stronger and stronger almost every minute after Miss Danvers seduces her to try suicide. So instead of weakening the new Miss De Winter and therefore creating more space for Rebecca in Manderley, the memory of Rebecca, she in fact, ironically, strengthens the narrator. Now, how does this happen? I mean, we could say that because the narrator imagines herself actually falling to her death, and she does. She imagines what it's like to fall through the mist and how it will be quick and how it won't hurt long because she'll hit the cobblestones and die quickly. It's as if she imagines her death so vividly that, in a way, symbolically, she does die. And with the death of that self, the self that lived in terror of disappointing the people at Manderley, the self that constantly compared herself unfavorably to Rebecca, with the symbolic death of that self, it's as if another self emerges, and all the habits, all the neurotic habits that the narrator's been practicing throughout the novel, constantly, again, assuming people are thinking poorly of her, constantly assuming that she is inferior to Rebecca, constantly feeling inexperienced, constantly feeling unsure of herself. All that seems to go away. That self, in a way, dies. So, some examples of this transformation. So then, soon after the test from Miss Danvers, essentially the temptation from Miss Danvers, basically to commit suicide, soon after that, as everyone in Manderley is milling about around the bay, because indeed a large ship has run aground there, we will soon realize that underneath this ship is the ship that Rebecca was sailing when she allegedly had her sailing accident. Everyone's milling about the bay, and suddenly the narrator, who's really never asked for anything of the serving staff at all, and also who has turned down many times offers of alcoholic beverages to calm her down, especially Frank Crawley at the party, knowing she was a wreck of nerves because of the costume incident. He keeps offering her champagne. She won't take it. Suddenly, out of nowhere, she looks at Frith, the main butler, and says, "Give me a brandy." It's like, so suddenly it's like she has this, she can assert herself, and she feels confident enough to request a brandy, even though this seems a simple act. Given how she's behaved heretofore, it shows something in her has shifted, that now she feels more at home in Manderley. There are other such moments. So, right after she drinks her brandy, she realizes that all of her fears about Maxim leaving her because of the costume debacle have been unfounded. Again, Miss Danvers said, "You should wear the costume of one of the De Winter family members from the 18th century, and people will love that." Well, the narrator did not know that Rebecca had worn this very costume a year before. So when the narrator comes to the party and Maxim sees her, he didn't know what she was going to be wearing, he becomes extremely angry. So the narrator has thought since that moment that Maxim will leave her. Well, now suddenly she sees Maxim out helping everyone try to get the ship unstuck. And she says, "I felt shame at my fear of Maxim leaving me. I realized that he had not gone away. The voice I'd heard when he was talking to the officials about the ship was calm and practical. It was a voice I knew, a calm voice. He had not gone away." I'm paraphrasing a good bit here. He was down in the cove somewhere. He was himself, normal and sane. He'd just been for a walk, as Frank had said. He had been on the headland. He had seen the ship coming in towards the shore. All my fears were without foundation. So this is a startling shift. Heretofore, the narrator has done nothing but worry about Maxim not loving her, about Maxim leaving her, and she was all in a gigantic tizzy about Maxim leaving her after the costume debacle, and now she realizes, no, all those fears were groundless. I did not need to have those fears. So there's a calm here and a sanity here that we've not seen in this narrator at all. And then something else happens. Almost all the interactions the narrator's had with other people up until the suicide temptation, she's been very hindered in her ability to pay attention to what's happening in the present moment. She's either imagining what other people are thinking about her, always thinking people are thinking poorly about her, or she's daydreaming. She's imagining what life will be like in the future, might be better. Or she's imagining what life was like in the past with Maxim when she felt that he was in love with her. Again, life might be better. So the narrator has not been able to take really much interest at all in the world around her. She lives very much inside of her head. And of course, this is the odd paradox of someone who is so masochistic. Her masochism, I'm terrible, everyone thinks I'm terrible, manifests itself as a kind of narcissism. She assumes that people are always thinking of her when they're probably not thinking of her at all. So here she's sitting out again, looking out over the bay, looking at the stranded ship, and she suddenly just looks around and she sees, oh, look at this little boy. He's there with a woman in a pink striped frock and a hairnet across her, a hairnet in her hair. And the boy says, "Oh, Mom, I would like to be a diver." And the woman nodded and smiled. And the little boy continues saying, "Oh, I'd really like to be a diver." And then a member of the Coast Guard comes in and starts talking about the diver's report, the divers going underneath the ship to try to see if one can get it out. But for about a page and a half, the narrator is simply paying attention to this interchange between the son and this mother, paying attention to what the mother's wearing, paying attention to what the son is saying. She's also paying attention to what the Coast Guard is saying. It's like for the first time, she's simply taking the world in without commenting on it in great detail. We could think in the past, before the suicide temptation, she might be thinking, oh, well, that woman's probably wondering what I'm doing here. That woman's probably wondering if I'm even belong here. She might think, oh, the Coast Guard thinks I'm not being supportive of Maximum. But none of that's there. It's like suddenly the gum of masochism slash narcissism has been removed from her eyes, and she can pay attention to what is in front of her. Right around the same time, we're talking within like a couple of hours time period, she suddenly thinks that Manderley is her house. Again, prior to this, she's assumed that, oh no, Rebecca's still in the house. It's like she's haunting the house, and I'm a stranger here, I'm an actor here, and I'm an imposter here. But she says, oh, I looked up at the house, it was very peaceful. I was looking at it from the banks of the bay, and I realized, perhaps for the first time, with a funny feeling of bewilderment and pride, that it was my home. I belonged there, and Manderley belonged to me. The trees and the grass and the flower tubs on the terrace were reflected in the mullioned windows. A thin column of smoke rose in the air from one of the chimneys. The new-cut grass on the lawn smelt sweet as hay. A blackbird was singing on the chestnut tree. A yellow butterfly winged his foolish way before me to the terrace. So not only does she suddenly realize, oh, this house is mine, I have the confidence, I have the power to inhabit this house with elegance and confidence, but she also pays attention again to the visible details of the world around her. She appreciates the smoke, she appreciates the grass, she appreciates the blackbird, she appreciates the chestnut tree, she appreciates the yellow butterfly. So all of this comes together when finally she does meet up with Maxim again after the costume debacle. They have their first conversation since that time, and she says to him, whatever problem you have, and indeed Maxim gains some information that is quite problematic. Whatever problem you have, I want to share it with you. I'm grown up, Maxim. In 24 hours, I'll never be a child again. So what we need to get is not only the irony of Miss Danvers' attempt meant to eradicate the narrator, but in fact turns out to empower the narrator. We also need to get the irony of the narrator caring so much about how she appeared to others, even though on the surface this seems, as I've mentioned, masochistic, even though if on the surface this seems like someone who has no sense of self. Of course, someone who's constantly imagining others are thinking about them has a gigantic sense of self. Masochism can be an extreme form of narcissism, assuming that everyone is thinking poorly of you. Yes, that makes me feel terrible, but also assuming that people are thinking poorly of me, that's also assuming that people care a lot about me, that I am of interest to others. Only when the narrator, looking out over the balcony, thinking of killing herself, only when she imagines herself annihilated, only when she imagines her ego erased, can she suddenly start inhabiting the world without this debilitating combination of masochism slash narcissism. And at this point, she gains what we might call a reality principle. She's been living so much in her head, so neurotically in her head, that she hasn't been able to see the world right in front of her eyes one time. But now suddenly she can. And she can enjoy a conversation between a mother and a son. And she can enjoy a conversation between members of the Coast Guard. She can enjoy looking at the house. She can feel comfortable asking for brandy. And she can tell her husband that whatever terrible thing you're getting ready to tell me, and it's pretty terrible, I'm here and I'm strong. I'm an adult. You don't have to take care of me now as a little child. So it's the suicide temptation is a major turning point in the novel. Now, what one wants to pay attention to is how does this newly empowered narrator interact with Maxim for the rest of the narrative? Does she gain a healthier relationship with him because of her new sense of strength? or does this new self have its own perils? We'll see.